For those of you still joining us, welcome. While you're getting settled, we'll get started. Hello and welcome to our webinar, Cybersecurity Essentials for Small Business. I'm Ron Bush, president of Ron Bush Consulting. At Ron Bush Consulting, we help you protect your organization while limiting your liability. In this day and age, litigation is a natural outcome of data breach. Over the past few years, cyber attacks have been evolving at a rapid pace, and we've seen firsthand how it can disrupt our clients' business operations. Today, we've invited you to learn new tips and tricks because the more you know about digital security threats, the better you can protect your company, your customers, and your data. We'll also be providing you with 3 free tools to help. We're joined by Shanna Utgard, Success Manager at Defendify, our strategic cybersecurity partner. I have just a few quick housekeeping items before I hand it over to Shanna. All participants are muted. If you have any questions throughout the course of this presentation, please type them into the Q&A box, and then when we have time at the end of the presentation, we'll address them. We'll also be monitoring chat should you run into any difficulties, and we'll do our best to get you back up and running. There will also be 2 quick poll questions that'll pop on your screen. And with that, I'll hand it over to Shanna.
Thank you, Ron. And as he mentioned, I'm Shanna Utgard, the Success Manager at Defendify. Defendify is an all-in-one SaaS-based cybersecurity platform designed specifically for small and medium businesses. We offer a simple, holistic solution with a single goal to help secure small business from existing and evolving threats. So today we're going to dig into some incidents that have happened. We're going to talk about where the threats are actually coming from and provide some tips and tricks on what you can do to help protect your business and even use in your personal life. So we'll finish off at the end by talking about what a well-rounded cybersecurity program looks like. And we're going to start off with a couple stories here. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Anthem breach. And folks on this call may have even been affected. There were 78.8 million people total. A whole lot of personal health information was lost in this breach. And it all started with a phishing email that came into Anthem. An employee interacted with that email, and it allowed remote access to the network. An alarming detail is that it took Anthem almost a year to discover that an attacker was even inside their network. There's a statistic that the mean time to identify a breach on average is 197 days before an attacker is discovered. We like this story in particular because it's very close to home for us. We're up here in Maine. There are only 1 million people in the entire state, but cyber attacks are still happening here. And this is a story about the Maine Office of Information Technology. They decided that they were going to use a tool to move a database. What they didn't realize is that when they used this web-based tool, it put the confidential private information of 2,100 foster parents on a public-facing website. The statistic at the bottom is that 43% of data breaches are caused by an insider threat. And later we're going to cover what an insider threat actually is. This is an interesting story. It's about MacEwan University. It's a Canadian school up in Alberta. They were doing a lot of construction on the campus. They got an email from their construction company saying, hey, we're changing banks in a few weeks. We want to make sure that future invoices are sent to the right bank. And that communication went on back and forth for weeks between the school finance department and the contracting company. The university paid those contractor invoices, but instead of paying the contractor, wire transfers totaling $11.8 million were sent to cyber attackers that had been posing as the construction company all along. What's amazing to me is that a crime this significant was accomplished simply by email. And at the bottom there, you see that many organizations are now focusing on employee training. 69% of those firms are saying that once they teach people inside the company how to identify and avoid cyber fraud, really is going to reduce the number of incidents. So our first poll that we have that we're going to launch is, has your business experienced a cyber attack? So we're going to launch this poll here. We'll give everybody a few minutes to be able to select the answer. This one should be pretty quick. Got some votes rolling in here. Okay. Yeah, most of you have responded. Okay, so I'm going to close this poll down here. So has your business experienced a cyber attack? 63% of you say no. We're going to see if that changes later on in this presentation. So if you're like most people on this call, you probably think that a cyber attack isn't likely to happen to you or hasn't happened to you. Maybe you don't even have any information that an attacker would even want. We hear so much in the news about these large enterprise organizations being victims of cybercrime, but in actual fact, 68% of small businesses have experienced a cyber attack, and 50% of attacks are focused on small to mid-sized companies. And just for a little context there, we use small and medium-sized businesses. The SBA defines that as an organization with 500 employees or less, although I think if you ask any business owner of a 500 employee company, they wouldn't call themselves small or medium. We think it's very interesting to compare protecting a business physically to protecting a business from cyber attacks. We see businesses investing all kinds of money in ways to protect themselves. It's physical protection. They install video cameras, alarm systems, they have door sensors, maybe a card that you need to get into the building. They store all of their valuable inventory in locked rooms. They have employee handbooks so employees know how to be great employees. They train their teams on safety. Yet the average loss from a burglary is only about $2,000, while the average loss from a cyber breach is hovering around $120,000 for a small and medium business, and it just works its way up from there. And in similar fashion to protecting a business physically, you can protect yourself digitally as well. So you can control access with a firewall. You can have an alarm system on your network that alerts you to any suspicious activity. You can store your data securely, keep everything locked down. It's important to have policies that outline how employees are expected to use company computers, mobile phones, and applications. And awareness training is so vital today. You want to make sure that your employees can identify a cyber attack and know what to do if they're receiving one. Yet, most of the organizations that we meet with look like this. They have antivirus on their computers, they have a firewall between the internet connection and the network, and that's really about it. It's nowhere near comprehensive enough to protect the data of small businesses. One of the things that I hear the most in this job is, I have antivirus and firewall. Isn't that enough? There are 4 to 5 new malware samples released every single second. So by the time we are done with this webinar, there will be over 15,000 new pieces of malware that are released. And the way that your regular antivirus works is it compares the known malware samples to what you're trying to open up or do on your computer. If it's a match, the antivirus software will say, oh, that's not good, don't open that. But with the amount of times that these bad actors are changing that malware, it's nearly impossible for antivirus systems to keep up, and it's just not enough nowadays. It's very interesting as well when you start talking to organizations about what kind of data they need to protect. One way to think about this is by asking the question, would I be comfortable posting this information on a public-facing website for everybody to read? Your sales brochures? Yeah, sure, why not? That could be public-facing. You'd want that kind of information out there. If the answer is no, then it's sensitive and it needs to be protective. Every organization has sensitive data. The number one thing that we hear is, well, I don't store credit cards, so I'm okay. But there's a lot more to it. It could be personally identifiable information for your employees, your customers. We work with a company that we were talking to, and they make food products. And we said, and what is one piece of data that you would really want to protect? And they said, our recipes. Nobody could get our recipes, or otherwise they could make the same food that we're making. So you probably have your own company intellectual property or trade secrets, tax documents for employees or in your company, bank information, wire transfer details, vendor agreements, price lists, legal documents, your customer sensitive data. The list just goes on. So you'll want to look at your information and determine what is sensitive and what needs to be protected, and then working towards understanding who has access to it. So when we start to talk about threats, cyber threats come from a variety of different areas. In the top left of our screen, we have our cyber criminals who are causing their crimes to make money. In the top right, we have hacktivists who are causing their attacks because maybe they don't like a particular company or a political party. Anonymous is a great example of hacktivists. In the bottom left-hand corner, we have cyber soldiers from other countries. They may even be state-sponsored, and they are going after the United States, public, private, and government organizations. We're doing the same thing in the other direction in a defensive nature. In the bottom right, we have our insider threats. Insider threats are employees, contractors, ex-employees, or ex-contractors who have or had valid access to the network and data. Their actions could be malicious, but often they just do things in error. A great example of this was that IT person who accidentally shared the confidential information of the Maine foster parents. Sure, it wasn't intentional, but it can still happen. A great example of this too is becoming an insider threat can be extremely simple. I go to send an email with sensitive information to Ron, and I start typing RON, I hit enter, it auto-populates the wrong Ron, and I just hit send because I'm moving too quickly, and boom, I've just sent confidential information out, and that it could be considered a data breach. When we talk about cyber criminals causing their crimes to make money, this gives you an idea of what the data sells for in the dark web. And the dark web is not a place that you can go to with Google Chrome or Internet Explorer. People have to use Tor browsers to supposedly hide their identity. There's chat rooms and forums, and this is where people go to sell guns and drugs and information, social security numbers. You see that those sell for about $1 each. Financial logins can be anywhere from $20 to $200. A lot of people always say credit card information seems a little bit low, but that's because the credit card companies and banks do a really good job at stopping that fraud while it's in action. Credit cards with fulls info comes with full information. It could be address, checking account information, mother's maiden name. The more information that goes along with it, the more valuable it is. And medical records continue to top the charts. We see this over and over again because they include a lot of information. You've got both the personally identifiable information as well as health information on an individual, social security numbers. We've seen a lot of things. It could be used for insurance fraud is the first one that usually comes to mind for most people. And we've also seen instances of extortion of a CEO of a company, having an undisclosed medical condition that they don't want to get out. So that is continually the number one thing that these attackers are after and selling on the dark web. So if you store any kind of personal health information, it should definitely be on high alert. There are numerous tactics that these hackers use. We're going to go through a lot of these in depth here, but the most prevalent of all is phishing emails. Over 90% of cyber attacks start with a successful phishing email. So this is where an email comes into an organization. It could be from an employee, an executive, a contractor, a vendor, and it's trying to get the employee to interact with it in some way, shape, or form. Back in the day, phishing emails were more of a shotgun approach. We targeted a large number of people at one time. You may have even received an email once from a Nigerian prince who has millions of dollars to get out of the country. And surprisingly, we still do see this quite often. But now that we're seeing these phishing attacks get much more sophisticated and professional. So they're coming from your bank saying that there's been suspicious activity on your account, or social media saying they've prevented an unauthorized sign-in, or there's a shipment coming to your company or to you specifically. These are all designed to generate or elicit an emotional response. You don't want to be locked out of your bank. You don't want suspicious activity. Somebody tried to log into your account. You're getting a package. So in this situation, if you get an email like this, you want to navigate directly to that website and enter that information. Call your bank and verify if there's suspicious activity that's occurred. Go directly to FedEx and log in. Recently, we have seen a very interesting progression of the phishing emails surrounding the coronavirus pandemic. The very first emails that we saw going out looked like they were coming from the CDC and the World Health Organization, and it was talking about things that you can do to protect yourself or what the symptoms are. Then as it started to spread across the United States, we were seeing emails that there was a Johns Hopkins map that was a coronavirus tracking app. There was an app that was being downloaded, a tracker app that was distributing ransomware and demanding payment. And it would move to, there's been a new case in your area, click here for details. Once all of the states really seemed to be affected and that we had a economic crisis going on, we saw a shift in the phishing attacks to disaster relief, grants, loans, PPP. So it's been very interesting to watch the progression of the phishing emails throughout this pandemic. Again, always designed to generate that emotional response and get you to act quickly. Social media is a big attack method. So if Ron and I were going to connect on LinkedIn, he would get an email with an invitation and a button to accept. You would never want to click directly through these emails. Always go straight to that webpage. We've seen a lot of instances where people have logged into their social media accounts, seeing that there was a request, and they get in there and there's no connection request there. Another form of social engineering and phishing is called pretexting. So this is where attackers focus on creating a good pretext or a fabricated scenario that they're going to use to try to steal their victim's personal information. So in these types of attacks, the scammer usually says that they need little bits of information to confirm their identity, or maybe, you know, again, I have your personal cell phone number, but in actuality, what they're trying to get you to do is they may ask you to go out and buy gift cards, or they're taking that personal information and they're using it for a larger spear phishing attack at somebody else, trying to use your personal information or to commit some identity theft. Oftentimes, they'll pose as HR personnel, IT staff, it could be, you know, somebody from the finance department. So be wary of any of these emails asking, you know, are you at your desk? I need a favor. I need your cell phone number, or asking you for any kind of personal information. So there's a lot of reasons why these phishing attacks are so rampant. Mainly it's because there's so much information available about us and our organizations online. So these attackers are researching on LinkedIn and Facebook. They're on your company webpage. They're learning about the hierarchy in your organization, specific relationships, who does what, so that they can tailor an email to specific people within your company. If your marketing team is doing a really great job promoting your company, there's even more information for the cyber criminals to utilize. And so they'll gather that information and perform what's called spear phishing. They'll send emails to specific individuals trying to get them to interact with that email. Remember the story about the university where the cyber criminals were pretending to be the construction company? There was a lot of marketing going on about the university building on campus and working with XYZ construction company, and it gives a really good opportunity for those cyber criminals anywhere in the world to pretend to be that construction company. And a lot of the times they will spoof an email address to make it look like it's coming from a trusted sender, but it's not. It may look like it's coming from the CEO of the organization or somebody from finance. And when that email lands on an employee's inbox, the cyber criminals are trying to get the employee to do one of four things. Fill out a form to get some kind of information out of them. Most commonly, it will take you to a landing page and it's asking for a username and a password. We'll talk more about that later. They want you to click on a link, like in the FedEx or bank examples, which again, a lot of the times will take you to a malicious website trying to capture your login credentials, or can be used to distribute malware or ransomware. Attachments. This should be a red flag if you receive an email from someone that you weren't expecting and they want you to open a file. A lot of the times there's not a ton of context around that. It may just be invoice with nothing in the subject, or here's the document you requested. So they're trying to get you to open that attachment. And the last thing they're trying to get you to do is take action. So perhaps it's send a sensitive document, maybe a tax document, get you to pay an invoice or send a wire transfer, go out and buy gift cards, provide some type of confidential information. So those are the four things that they're always trying to get you to do. And just a quick recap here. If you receive an email from someone that is unexpected and it asks you to fill out a form, click on a link, open an attachment, perform some type of action, reply with confidential information, and especially anything that seems to be urgent, time sensitive, reach out to that sender and verify using a different method, a phone call, an instant message, a text message, any way that you have to contact them that's not the original method. So a lot of the times we'll see people, responding to emails, and they're really just responding back to the attacker if there's a phone number or an email address. We worked with a CEO at an organization who had clicked on a phishing email. The attackers got her password. They changed all of the rules in her inbox to forward any incoming messages and delete any evidence of correspondence. And they sent several emails to a new employee, brand new employee, eager to please, stating that the CEO was at a trade show, which she was. So they had a big social media announcements, come see us at this booth at this event. And they asked the new employee to go out and buy $1,500 worth of gift cards for the CEO to give out at the event. So the employee, wanting to do a good job in her first week, did what was asked of her. The attacker sent the exact same email a second time, said, I ran out, I need $1,500 more. And that could have been avoided by the new employee or anybody in the organization just calling to verify that request. So we're going to launch another poll here quickly. Our next poll question is, what types of phishing or social engineering attacks has your business experienced? So your options here are malicious attachments or URLs, CEO impersonation, so somebody pretending to be, one of the leaders of your company, wire fraud attempts, gift card scams or shopping requests, webcam blackmail. That was a fun one. They're saying, I've been watching you on your webcam. I know what you've been doing. Spoofed domains, so somebody setting up a domain that looks like it's your business. Fake social media connection requests, unusual account activity notifications. So give it a little bit more time. This is a multiple choice question, so select as many answers as pertain to your organization. All right, so we're seeing a good amount of these, not so many anymore of the webcam blackmail or fake social media requests, but all of the rest of them, big CEO impersonation. All right, which is very interesting because if you remember in the beginning of our webinar, 63% of you said you had not experienced a cyber attack, but these votes say otherwise. So this is one of my favorite polls that we launch here. Good to get you thinking about cyber attacks and something other than just, bad guy trying to break into your network. So sounds like you have experienced a lot of cyber attacks and very on par with most of these conversations that I have. So moving out of phishing, now we're going to jump into vishing, which is a combination of voice and phishing. It's a practice of using deception over the phone to get you to reveal personal, sensitive, or confidential information. So instead of being, an email or a fake website, this is a phone scam that often targets assistants, receptionists, finance team members, tech support people. It's very easy for scammers to fake caller ID. And these phishing scams not only are a business attack, but we see this in our personal lives as well. A lot of phishing scams target the elderly. Could be somebody calling up saying that you're not going to receive your Social Security or other type of benefits blocking. We see these scams with your grandchild is in trouble. We have people that are getting calls pretending to be the IRS, your bank, your mobile phone company. I had one a few weeks ago that said that there had been some outages in my area and they wanted to give me a credit on my bill. And so I said, no problem. Let me just hang up and I'm going to call my cell phone company back on a known number. And the attacker immediately was like, oh, no, you don't need to do that. We're legitimate. We're legitimate, which I immediately knew that they were not. So over the phone is also an attack method, and text messaging is becoming an increasing text message or attack method. This is an example of a message saying an Apple ID is about to expire. When you click on the link in the text message, it takes you to a page that looks like Apple, but it's not. They want you to put in your username and password. And we hit sign in, the page crashes. Meanwhile, they've accomplished what we call credential harvesting. So they've captured your login and password. And this is a very common method because a lot of people are using their personal mobile phones nowadays to access company documents, company email. So there's another good smishing example, which is SMS phishing, is a text message that says something along the lines of, your ABC bank account has been suspended. To unlock your account, tap here, and the link provided will download malware onto your phone. They're also adjusting, so you might get a text message, try to create urgency that says like, is this really a picture of you with an obscured link? You want to find out if that really is a picture. And once again, you could be downloading malware, all because they want to get access to your phone to be able to access company information that is stored on there. And now we are even seeing the use of social media to spread malware. So this was very interesting. Just last month, this was an article that was posted about LinkedIn being used. And that exact same day, our co-founder of our company got a random message from one of his connections with an attachment, exactly what this email article was talking about, with no context around the attachment, and a lot of people would just be opening that up. So this is now the latest and greatest attack method, is social media. One of the terms that we're also seeing everywhere now is ransomware. This is because these attacks are skyrocketing again. So this is a type of malware that infects your computer. You're going about your day, maybe you open up an attachment that somebody sent to you, and next thing you know, your computer is completely locked up. Your files are all encrypted. You can't open anything, you can't access anything, and the attacker leaves you a message saying, we have your files, and until you pay us X amount of money in cryptocurrency, you can't access them. And if you do pay, we'll give you a code and you'll be able to unlock your data. And often this ransomware is programmed to travel laterally throughout the network. So it will start on one computer and then it will move and infect other computers and servers and storage devices. One of the biggest problems with ransomware, other than the ransom, is downtime. Hopefully your IT team has great backups in place, but even still, wiping the machines back down to bare bones, reinstalling all of the systems and from the backups can take significant time. I saw a statistic that the average time that a company is down because of ransomware is about a week. So imagine not being able to do any business, not being able to access any of your company records, and having to pay your employees in a week to get everything back up and running. And even with good backups, there are often residual or lingering effects of ransomware. Many companies find themselves down for days at a time. The attackers have now started taking information. So if you have personal health information, for example, and you're under HIPAA compliance, the new threat is they've taken that information, and unless you pay the ransom, they're going to release it, and then you are going to have a breach on your hands, and you'll have to go through the whole process of, breach notification and remediation because of that disclosure. Some organizations have no choice. They either do not have good backups in place, or there could be something time sensitive, like occasionally we see in the medical field, and they have to pay these criminals and try to get their files back or unlock them. It's not every time that these attackers are going to just give you the code and it works and you get your files back. About 50% of businesses that pay do not get all of their files. They're cyber attackers after all. Plus, obviously, when we keep paying the cyber criminals, we're going to continue to be targets for these types of attacks. We want to avoid that by having the right technologies in place and training our teams not to click on links or open files. You can see at the bottom the estimated costs of ransomware. They just keep skyrocketing. $11.5 billion in 2019. 2020 has been even worse. This is a great national story here about Baltimore. Baltimore had ransomware. They refused to pay the ransom. $18 million later. What's very interesting to me as well about this Baltimore ransomware attack is they actually had 2 different ransomware attacks. And we're seeing attacks on not only government municipalities, we are seeing a huge increase in the number of attacks on U.S. K-12 public schools, public school districts. This is a heat map from 2016 to the present. These are all of the attacks that have happened on K-12 public schools. This could be disclosures, breaches, hacks, ransomware attacks, phishing that resulted in the disclosure of data, denial of service attacks. And this is a brief listing of some of the towns and cities that have publicly had ransomware and cyber attacks. Even Augusta, Maine, up here, our tiny little capital, experienced an attack last year. Another huge attack surface is the Internet of Things. So you probably have some Internet of Things devices in your house, whether you have a smart refrigerator that makes grocery lists for you, or Alexa device, or a thermostat. Right now, it's estimated that there's, in 2019, about 26 billion of these IoT devices. That is expected to jump up to over 75 billion devices by 2025. This poses a major security risk. A lot of these devices are not designed to be very secure, and this is just another emerging attack method. We'll talk about everybody's favorite topic here, password health. These were the most common passwords of 2019. Number 1 being 1234556. Guessing we had to get into some complexity requirements and people needed longer passwords, so we added the 789 for password number 2. A lot of number recycling here, QWERTY going right across the keyboard, things that are pretty easy to remember. This is a problem because passwords are very easily cracked. Researchers wanted to see how easily, and as you can see in this chart, even with a good complexity of numbers, upper and lower case letters and symbols. You know, a 5-character password here can be cracked in 10 seconds. But you see, if you go down to 15 characters, a mixture of characters will take 2 trillion years with a T. So with passwords, where everything is headed is length. The longer the password, the more secure it is. It's very difficult, though, if you're trying to remember your passwords. So a quick solution is to use a passphrase. A passphrase is a long sentence with spaces and special characters. This is an example of a great one. So you go out and you create this nice 20-character password that's a big, long sentence and easy enough to remember. The problem with passwords is that we recycle those passwords. We use that same 20-character long passphrase across all of our accounts. It is extremely important to create a unique individual password for all of your online accounts. 73% of online accounts are guarded by duplicate passwords. So people are using the same password for their email, their social media, their bank accounts. Let's go through a quick scenario here. Let's imagine we're all back in the office again, and your team has just been doing a spectacular job. You want to reward them and order lunch. So you go to your local pizza place's website, and they tell you that you have to create an online account to be able to order pizza. So you use your work email address because you're ordering for the company, and you put in the password that you use for everything. Let's say it's sunshine123. Your local pizza place probably doesn't have really good cyber protections in place. The attackers are able to compromise that database and steal your username and password. They know that they can go on and try that business email and password combination and try to get into your email account, your QuickBooks, whatever types of software programs that are specific to your industry. Maybe it's a point of sale system, or they try to get into your LinkedIn or your social media accounts. They know that human behavior is to use that same password across all of your different logins. And before you know it, those attackers could have that key to the castle. This is why the attackers are always going after username and password combinations. They know that if you haven't logged into MySpace or MyFitnessPal in years, chances are you're probably still using that password across your more valuable accounts. This is a list of the largest breaches that have occurred in recent history. You can see in the middle the number of accounts that were compromised in the millions, and in every single one of these scenarios, it's username and password, username and password. And then they, in turn, after they're done using that, they will put those passwords available. They'll sell them or trade them on the dark web for anybody else to be able to use as well. A solution for this is, a lot of organizations realize that compromised credentials are eventually going to happen. So we begin using password managers for the employees. These are tools that employees can use to create long, strong, random passwords for all of the sites that they log onto and store them securely. I saw a statistic that small businesses use on average about 20 software as a service or cloud applications. So it would be nearly impossible to expect employees to remember 20 different unique passwords. So you want to give them some tools to help. And in the event that one of these unique passwords for one of the sites is breached, you can immediately go in and change that password to a new random unique one without allowing those attackers the ability to access all of your other accounts. I also strongly recommend that you implement this into your personal life as well. I use one. I went through what I call a digital detox last year, and every time I came across one of my accounts that had the password that I had used for the last 15 years across every single one of my logins, and I just went through one by one and going in and changing each of the passwords to a random long unique one and storing it in my password manager. It's extremely, extremely important. There are free tools out there. They integrate really well with your browsers. It doesn't really add a lot of time to be able to log in. My password manager can generate my password and dump it into an account faster than I used to be able to type the old one out. So strongly, strongly recommend a password manager. And also, one of the most important tips that you should take from this webinar, if nothing else, is to turn on two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. So you may have probably experienced this previously, maybe when you log into your bank account from a different computer, it will prompt and send you a text message. So two-factor authentication is when you log into this website, you're going to enter your username and password. Then you can't get into that site until you enter the code. So it may be sent to you in a text message, or you might have an app that's running on your phone that will produce a new random code every 30 seconds. Or perhaps it's a key fob that you carry around. So it's a combination of something that you know, which is your password, and something that you have or that you are. So there's even some biometrics that are happening, which is, the code or a fingerprint or an eye scan. So even if an attacker is able to get your password, as soon as they're trying to log in, they see that screen asking them for that second factor, they're typically is going to stop them in their tracks. They're going to move on to another account and go for some low-hanging fruit. At the bottom there, turn on 2FA.com. It's a great website where you can go and learn how to enable 2FA on most of your accounts. So if you leave this webinar with only one actionable item, please get this enabled wherever you can. Google implemented two-factor authentication for their employees, and it cut cyber attacks down to nothing. So turn this on wherever you possibly can. Any account that you would want to protect, your email, social media, banking, financial, anything like that. And one other thing I'll add about this, I've had people that have said to me after that they've read that text message codes aren't extremely secure, that there are difficult but possible ways for attackers to bypass that. If the website that you are using only has the ability for SMS or text codes, still turn it on, because some protection is better than none. And then the last thing we'll talk about really quickly here before we'll take a break and pause and see if there are any questions is about USBs. So, oops, sorry, I just advanced my screen too much. So this is a really interesting study that was done by the University of Illinois. They had almost 300 USB drives, those little removable storage devices, and they spread them all around the college campus. They wanted to see if people would pick them up and plug them in. Almost half of them were, some within minutes of being dropped on the ground. People were really curious what was on them. This is dangerous for a few different reasons. The first is that USB drive could have malware on it. So you're plugging it into your computer, you have no idea what's on there, and it could infect your computer. Another element of USB drives is if you allow them in your company, you run a higher risk of the insider threat. So maybe not even intentional. You've got a great employee that is going to be working on the weekend. They're going to be on the road. They pop into a coffee shop and they're sitting down getting a little bit of work done, and they accidentally leave that USB drive on the table. We know from the study that over half of people are going to pick it up and plug it in, and you could have confidential or sensitive information on that USB drive, and all of a sudden you now have a data breach on your hand. So we highly discourage the use of USB keys, but we do also understand that there are some organizations that need to use these. If you find yourself in that scenario, there are encrypted drives that you can get that will reduce that risk. Okay, so we're going to pause really quickly here. I'm going to grab a quick sip of water, but if you have any questions so far about what we've talked about with some of the threats and where they're coming from, you can go ahead and either throw them into the chat box or the question and answer box. And I'm just going to pause really quickly. Ron, you have anything you want to add at this point?
Well, while you're grabbing that drink of water, I might just expound on the Urbana-Champaign campus study. That's an old trick that hackers have used for really a couple of decades, going back to the floppy drives. They used to, bank examiners as well have used it. I remember taking a cyber forensics class, and believe it or not, a banker was there, and he said that it was a common occurrence before a bank examiner would come around, drop initially floppy disk, later a CD, and later on the USB. And what that would do in the case of a bank exam, of course, that would bring up a blue screen that says basically you're busted, and of course the bank president or whoever, HR, whoever the person might be, would come across either that employee would be disciplined or let go, depending on how hard they had trained them in the past to not do that. Of course, if it was a hacker, well, they wouldn't know that there was a virus on there. They wouldn't know it was something they wouldn't have that they shouldn't have done, because it would install some sort of virus, a rootkit, something that now would spread to the rest of the bank. It's an old trick. Hackers drop them in shopping centers, strip malls, whatever the case might be, office complexes. It's an easy way to get into to company data. And if you're in an office complex, even better, you can get into a number of offices, a number of companies. So I appreciate all that's going on. Shanna, I'll give it right back to you.
So I feel like most of the people that are attending this, you're probably going, woo, that's a lot of information. So now what? Where do we go from here? We've shared some of those tips and tricks and stories. Let's talk really quickly about what organizations can do to bolster better cybersecurity. The first thing that we want you to think about is the way that you look at cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is no longer a nice to have, it is becoming a must have. And it's not a project. It's not something that you do once and then you're protected, you get to walk away. It's a posture that everyone in the organization has to take. You know, you can have one or two phenomenal IT people in your group, you can have Ron on your side, and everybody takes cybersecurity seriously, but all it takes is one employee who doesn't that puts you at risk. So the entire company from top to bottom has to have this attitude or posture in regards to cybersecurity. And you need more than one layer. Most people immediately think of technology as a solution for, you know, cybersecurity. And while you do need to have technology elements in place that go beyond traditional antivirus and firewalls, you also need to have a culture where everybody understands how to be a good cyber defender. You need a layer of policies, procedures, and plans so that you know what to do in the event of an incident. There's no technology silver bullet for cybersecurity. I wish there was, but unfortunately there's not. And there's no one-size-fits-all approach. So if your organization wants to go through a step-by-step process to start improving your cybersecurity posture, we recommend starting with an assessment that goes through different cybersecurity controls. You can imagine them like a checklist, and it will show you where you stand. So it'll give you a grade. You'll know immediately, you know, kind of roughly where you stand, and then you'll know exactly where you have any weaknesses, where your strengths are. It's a great place to begin. And then you can begin looking at, you know, your business, your needs, your budget, and go through and prioritize, you know, which of those recommendations, you know, need to be addressed first. Another great way to start is with some technical scanning tools, one key tool being a vulnerability scanner. So that is run against the outside of the network and also on the inside of the network. Ron and I just did a great podcast this past week where we talked a lot about vulnerability scanning and patching and some, you know, good analogies about, you know, security guards and exactly what these scanning tools do. So definitely recommend checking that out to learn a little bit more about that. But, you know, computers that haven't been updated or patched, firewall ports that are exposed to the internet. Cyber criminals are looking for these types of things as a way to cause their crimes. So you can run scanning tools that will let you know and ensure that all of your devices are up to date, all of your vulnerabilities are patched. It's a very important part of a cybersecurity program. And then you can even take that one step further. A lot of companies ask us, would a bad guy even be able to get into my network? Like, could somebody actually hack me? So we like to perform what we call ethical hacking tests. They're also known as penetration tests. And this is when one of our certified white hat ethical hackers, we call them good guys doing bad things, they'll actually attempt to break into your network just like bad actors would do. And they'll provide back a report that tells you what they were able to accomplish, you know, details about how they were able to get in, all the screenshots along the way, if they're able to extract any information back out, give you a risk rating, and then some recommendations on how to prevent a break-in in the future. We've seen all kinds of crazy things, you know, tests where companies had their security cameras wide open to the internet. Anybody could see all their camera footage, and our ethical hackers were able to help them see that. We also mentioned that cyber criminals are stealing usernames and passwords. They're reselling them on the dark web. We highly recommend running a dark web scan on your employees' email addresses and passwords. Majority of the companies that we run this scan for will have employee credentials available on the dark web. It can be a little alarming seeing your clear text password coming back that we found, out in the wild. So the initial report will give you any, past exposures, and then you're able to go in and change all of those passwords, any place that you're using, any instance of that, and then also be alerted if any new credential breaches occur, so you can go in and change those passwords immediately before an attacker would be able to gain any access to your network, and help prevent some of that password recycling. Another scanning tool is website scanning. So a lot of companies put up their public-facing marketing website, they hire a web developer, and then once it's up and running, they never look at it again. A website can be an attack method. You can have malware injections, spam, it could redirect to another page, there can be vulnerabilities. Your site can also get blacklisted by the search engines, and then nobody's able to find your business anymore. You should also be checking to see if TLS is in place, or if you're getting that, if your customers are getting the not secure browser when they come to your web page. All of these things are really important because your website's public facing. And this is the first place that people go when they want to do business with you. There's a lot of your reputation that is tied to your website. We actually worked with an attorney whose About Us page was redirecting to a casino gambling website. And he was like, this is probably why I haven't been getting any referrals lately. Like, exactly why. So you can run some scanning tools against that to look for those types of things. Another important part of a well-rounded cybersecurity program are clear policies and plans. These are extremely important. The first one we recommend is an information technology and data use policy, which explains how employees are expected to use company computers, applications, mobile phones, devices. It sets the rules for employees regarding technology usage. There's a spot for them to be able to sign off. A lot of smaller companies nowadays only have a paragraph or two in their employee handbook about technology and data. It's just not enough nowadays from a legal liability standpoint. Your cyber insurance provider will probably ask you if you have these types of policies in place. If you do business with any large enterprise organizations, if they haven't already, they're going to be asking you about the types of policies that you have, the user training and testing that you're doing, and you'll want to make sure that you have a very clear, acceptable use policy for technology. Another really important policy is an incident response plan. This outlines what you're going to do in the case of an event. It's kind of like running a fire drill. So you should have a plan for being hit with malware or ransomware, a breach of sensitive data, so that you can get yourself back up and running with a very clear step-by-step process. In a past life, I worked as a real estate paralegal, and I wired $2.1 million to a cyber attacker who was posing as my out-of-state seller. There's definitely a lot more to that story, but one of the scariest parts to me, we were able to stop the wire before it fully went out. But I looked at my boss after the adrenaline rush and the full-on panic, and I said, what would we have done if that had gone out? And we had no plan whatsoever. And part of the reason why I got into this industry is to help anybody from ever feeling that type of panic ever again. It's still to this day sends chills up and down my spine. But the worst part of it was not having any type of plan. So imagine, we're sitting here, you get off this webinar, you open one of the emails that came in while you were listening to this, and your entire system gets locked up with ransomware. And all of a sudden it's moving across your network and affecting other computers. The quicker you're able to respond to one of those types of incidents, the less downtime you're going to have, the less remediation, the more money you're going to save, the less headaches you're going to have. So it's really important to have that in place before any incident happens. You don't want to run your first fire drill in the middle of a fire. We mentioned building a culture of cyber defenders in your organization. Companies nowadays are really taking training very seriously. I feel like the days of once-a-year cybersecurity training are almost over. Once-a-year training is very easily forgotten. Ongoing microlearning bursts reinforce the awareness message. They help to build that human firewall. Your employees are either going to be, your greatest strength or your biggest weakness. Employees now have to learn how to identify cybersecurity threats and phishing emails. Cybersecurity is no longer just IT's job, so you really need to continuously educate your employees about the way that cyber attacks are changing, the new attack methods that are out there. We use little ongoing microlearning 3-minute video bursts every month. You should also be receiving threat alerts. These are notifications about cyber-related topics. It could be vulnerabilities that are discovered and updates that need to be applied, phishing scams, new ransomware strains. You can see on my screen, this was back in April. We had a lot of threat alerts that were pertaining to coronavirus because all of the attacks were changing and evolving based on what was happening in the world. We are continuously one step behind these cyber attackers, so it is extremely important to stay up on the different types of threats and the way that those tactics are changing. You can also provide phishing training to your employees, and this is where emails are sent out monthly. Fake email comes to all of the people in your company. If the employees interact with this email, they click on a link or open an attachment, they enter their credentials, it's going to redirect them to a spot training module that says, oops, this wasn't a real attack, but it could have been, and then it will show them what they could have done differently, how they could have recognized that this was a phishing email. There's an example here on the screen that looks like an Adobe password reset email, and then you'll see how many employees clicked, and then it takes them all right to that on the spot point of failure training. And then there are several other technology solutions that you can have in place depending on your business needs. As we mentioned earlier, a password manager is a great tool. There are plenty of free ones out there. We can give you some recommendations there. Enabling two-factor authentication. Most important thing you can take out of this, I'm a big 2FA fan. If your company uses mobile devices, if you provide those for your employees, you should protect those as well. There are typically a lot of pieces of sensitive company data on them. They can be very easy to lose or steal. So there's mobile device management. You can have network monitoring that will alert you to any suspicious activity on your network. But as I mentioned earlier, technology is extremely important, but technology alone is not the answer. We have a few free resources that we're going to jump into for you now. I realize that a lot of people have probably been remote for a few months now, if you were able to make that digital transition. We do have a remote workforce cybersecurity checklist that we put together. So if that is something that you are interested in receiving, just to help either your internal IT staff or anybody in your organization make sure that you have made that remote transition securely, please feel free to contact Ron. He can get a copy of that for you. We also have a document with some cybersecurity resources, so some more tips and frequently asked questions. So if you attended the webinar today, we can get a copy of this cybersecurity resources page out to you. We have what we like to consider the first all-in-one cybersecurity platform. It is completely web-based, so you log in right from a web browser. It's got a nice dashboard that shows you immediately where you stand. You've got all of your tools right in one toolbox, and you've got a really great support system with Ron and all of the IT consulting work that he does. And the most exciting part, Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you for your fun special announcement.
Yes, anyone that's listening to this or watching this, I hope, please contact me. There's obviously a way to do that has come through the invitation. If you've had the invitation shared to you from someone else, my email is there, ron@ronbushconsulting.com. Welcome to call me, 219-617-2651. I would love to discuss further with you the Essentials package that is free with all the other tools. I think I know I share Shanna's, I guess, not infatuation, but her concern with the multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. But the phishing simulation is I think the most important thing you can do. because you're training your employees through all of that. But you see the essentials package, cybersecurity health checkup. We can do that together. The network vulnerability scanner, that's worth, it's almost unimaginable for me to put a price on that because of the value of that. The threat alert system, again, it isn't that the press doesn't report it. It isn't that there's a concerted effort to know what is going on. This gets the twice, 3 times a week, gets the alerts to you that is happening real time so that you can be aware of what those trends are. And these 3 things in the essentials package, they're free. Contact me and we'll get you started on that. And I can't wait to make that happen for you, because I know you'll be safer and I know you'll be happier and more secure as a result of it.
And especially if your business has gone through any type of digital transformation over the last few months, the network vulnerability scanning is especially important. If your internal IT or your IT provider has helped you transition to remote working, chances are they put some type of connection back to your corporate network. Maybe it was a VPN. When they do that, they have to make some configuration changes in your firewall to allow that connection back into your network. Running an external network vulnerability scan is extremely important because it's possible they could have inadvertently opened up some other holes, making configuration changes. You always want to run these types of scanning tools. So if you have made a recent digital transformation, you've gone to working remotely, please contact Ron to get set up with a free Defendify Essentials platform. You'll get all 3 of these modules. It's not time bound. They are unlimited and free. That vulnerability scanner is going to run every single month for you and just let you know if your firewall becomes outdated or there's an update that's been released, which happens quite frequently. You're going to know about it right away so that you can make sure that that's patched. So I'm going to bring this contact screen up one more time so that you have Ron's email and website and phone number. And we got just a few more minutes here. We'll open it up to questions. I haven't seen anything come through from the chat or the Q&A. Just want to make sure you're all still awake with us.
Mm-hmm. I did see one thing in the chat about the LinkedIn emails. A lot of that last breach that happened with LinkedIn did not get out. So I appreciate you touching on that. I think that all our attendees will have valued from this today. I hope that if you've missed this or any part of this, you want to view it again, it'll be attached to my website, ronbushconsulting.com. Please check it out there, review it. And of course, if you have any questions at all, contact me and I'll be glad to help in any way I can.
All right, well, I think with that, Ron, we will wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Any questions, please email Ron. He'd be happy to get you set up with those 3 free tools. And with that, we'll say everybody have a great rest of your afternoon. And until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.